I know this is a division you follow very closely, and it's been a hell of a series, to say the least. Ever since game one, there really hasn't been many close games, has there?
Yeah, before we get to talking about this, I want to go back to the promo with the 3-day package. This is actually the best time to buy it because on Mondays, you've got $9 Mondays. On Thursdays, you got half price throwback Thursdays. So now the next 3 days, you'll be paying full price. So I would recommend to get that right now. This is the perfect day to get it because, as you mentioned, you've got UFC going. And if you like the UFC, there's a lot of guys out there that do it. That's a full slate of weekend. Everybody plays all weekend. So this is the best time to buy that. So if you are on the fence, try that out for today and you'll get the entire weekend from any of us for 50% off. This is very interesting game. I don't know where to go. For those who have followed me in this series, I picked the Golden Knights game on as an underdog. They had the advantage in rest, and it paid off. They were the better team. After that, I came back and played Edmonton plus either 110 or 120 to win the series because it's not a very good matchup for Vegas. Vegas is a team who 5-on-5 is the better team. Problem is their power play is crap, and even with Stone back, it has not performed well. And Edmonton is terrific on the power play. Now we're coming off that last game where Edmonton wins 4-1. They looked very much in control the entire game. And as the game went on, as we've all saw, frustrations came into account. And they come into account anytime there's a blowout or a big lead. And now each team will be missing their best defensive player. So your first thought would be, okay, well, maybe this is a higher scoring game tonight. But then you realize that both Nurse and Pietrangelo are very key to the offense on these teams from a defensive standpoint. So maybe you can disregard that. But I run into the same problem as I had originally with this series is if it's 5-on-5, Vegas wins. If it's any type of an advantage for Edmonton on a penalty, Edmonton crushes. Well, now we've got two teams that are really upset about the way the last game was called and what happened. Is Vegas going to pull back and just try to play the 5-on-5, or will they come out and try to be more physical, which the refs are clearly going to be looking for coming into this game? There'll be penalties. If there's anything that was questionable, there'll be penalties. They're going to shut it down early so they don't get what they had at the end of the game. So I think there's going to be the penalties. And if there's penalties, you've got to look at Edmonton. Edmonton's about a 130 favorite here. Vegas is good at home, but they've been playing much better on the road all season long. What I think is probably going to happen is this will be a physical game. Edmonton's going to get the power plays. They'll be able to score. They'll take a 3-2 series lead back to Edmonton, and then Vegas will have their backs to the wall and going to have to keep the Oilers from beating us from the power play.
It is one of those things where if you look at things 5-on-5, it's a whole new series. Mm-hmm. And this Oilers team, they're not a bad team 5-on-5, but they certainly are a different team in comparison to Vegas, taking away those penalties. And, Bryan, it's interesting. I think I've heard you speak about this before, but I notice this all the time. Like I go to a lot of like junior hockey games, and I used to cover the league. And a lot of times a poor power play actually hurts a team because it almost is like a bit embarrassing, like if you go out there and if you have a couple power plays in a row and you're not really doing anything and the other team keeps dumping it down, you got to go chase it down. It's almost like some teams wish they could just refuse the power play. They're like, this is embarrassing. We're not doing anything, right? And so it almost in a weird way takes momentum away from you. And I when I say this, I mean no disrespect to Darnell Nurse, but I do think that this trade-off, whether anybody agrees with who got suspended for how many games, I think that it benefits Edmonton. Because I think Pietrangelo, like you mentioned, he contributes more offensively. I think that it'll just be a lot more minutes for some guys for the Oilers defense to step up defensively with Nurse's absence. I think he's a great player, but I think offensively it hurts Vegas more than it does offensively for the Oilers, which I think Vegas has kind of realizing now that they might need to score 3, 4, or 5 goals to beat the Oilers. I don't think we'll see a game where the Oilers score, less than 3 goals again for the rest of this series. I mean, we haven't seen it so far, so that could really hurt them big time. We're getting a 7 at plus 115, and I gotta say, I because of what you said there, and just in general with the physicality, it is kind of hard for me to imagine not seeing a lot of goals in this series. I mentioned in the Toronto series, not overthinking it and looking at the results we've seen already and looking towards the under. Now in this series, not every game has gone over, but that's also due to the blowout factor. We saw a back-to-back 5-1 games. Both those should have gone over the total, Brian, but they didn't because one team was dominating so much they were able to just park the bus, to use a soccer expression there, and they didn't need to score anymore. I do think this one can go over, but I'll probably look towards some player props and some team totals as well. But I'll tell you what, the first period overs are hitting at an alarming rate. And we talk about this during the show. If you want to avoid what happened with those games that went 5-1, you play the first period, right? Because, then that way you're not having a 5-1 game with 10 minutes to go in the third and nobody's scoring. And if you're someone that doesn't want to lay the minus 175 or 80 on the 1.5, you can bet the 2. And I'll tell you what, a lot of times when I've done that in a series like this one, worst thing that's happened to me is I get the push. The first periods have been huge in this series for goals. I might be looking at the first period over 2 at a plus price versus looking at a heavy price on the 1.5. But I'm with you, Brian. One handicap in this series, it really is a lot about the power plays. And as I've talked about on our prop show, Prop It Up, it's so interesting when you take a look at the power play point props, how much more value you can get on those compared to just regular props. And when you have a team like Edmonton that's over 50% on the power play, not really a bad idea to look at. So looking forward to this game, though. And I got to ask your thoughts. I know you're not a first period guy, but what do you think about kind of how I feel about betting the first period total?
Yeah, I would agree. Edmonton has scored the first goal in every one of these games. And unlike at the beginning of the series where Brossoit was in goal for Vegas and they had a capable backup, I hate to say this, but Quick would be our guy if Hill gets hurt. And Quick is just the opposite of his name any longer. He's just a step behind. And if Hill gets hurt in this game, I'm going to be betting the over. I tweeted something out to Marco the other day. I says, if we see Quick, man, as soon as that is announced that he's back in the lineup, that we start playing the over, because you've got the most talented offensive players in the league going up against a goalie who's seen better days, and he's been a tremendous hockey player in his career, but I don't want him in this in the playoffs here. So it's keep in mind that if something happens to Hill, start loading up on Edmonton and loading up on the over, and that's something to do in game.